Hello there, and welcome to Better Than This. This is a show for ambitious humans who are tired of the status quo playbook and are looking for something better. My name is Meghan French-Dunbar, and I've spent the last decade exploring what it would take to improve work for everyone, to discover whether or not it's possible to succeed in business without being forced to sacrifice ourselves, without the chronic stress, the burnout, guilt, overwhelm, the anxiety. Good news, it is. As an author, entrepreneur, journalist, and resident instigator, I've interviewed over 1,000 extraordinary business leaders who've achieved success by throwing the old playbook out the window and doing everything differently. What's even better is that this new playbook improves your performance, your workplace, and your life. If you're ready to admit that the way we're working isn't working and are looking for something better than this, you're in the right place. Let's get started. All right, friend. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about one particular, quote, feminine traits that often is overlooked or relegated to a soft skill or dismissed entirely as not being something that is appropriate in the business world. Intuition. Yeah. For some of you, you might have cringed there. It has some kind of woo-woo-esque associations, and it is a fantastic leadership skill. Quite literally, the vast majority of the women leaders that I have spoken to who have had hugely successful careers in their own right and are feeling a sense of thriving in their life, nearly every single one of them mentioned the role that intuition plays in their leadership. For example, here's Vicki Saunders.
It's absolutely central. I have literally no friction anymore from what I feel in taking action. Before I'd have all these other things. Well, what about this? And how about this? And all these things blocking the intuition. And now it's just whoosh. I literally navigate every single day through intuition. It's really quite fascinating. And it's just built up over time. When I, in the past, I had for quite some time of my life, decades, I didn't feel like I was surrounded by people who had the same values that I did and who encouraged me to do what I felt was right, despite how anti-narrative it usually was. And that, being in a community of folks who increasingly are just you've got this, that makes sense. Finding my people helped me to live more in my intuition, I would say. Because I, still along the way needed that outside validation of when I was just constantly hearing you're wrong, I still kind of went and did my own thing anyway. I think the stories around not following my intuition are much more about buying the story people are selling you of this is the way success is, or this is the way to go. And that's just not my story. So it takes a while, I think, to learn your story and to find your story. And then to live your story as a whole.
So today we're going to talk about the role of intuition in leadership, what it means, how to develop it, and why you should begin paying attention to your own intuition. So we'll start off, as I often do, with a fantastic story of a time when I didn't do the thing that I'm now telling us that we should be doing. So a while back, I'm going to say it's 2017, as I'm CEO of Conscious Company Media, we had put in a proposal to a very large foundation for them to give us a grant that would sponsor a ton of content throughout the year. And it would have been a significant portion of our annual revenue if we were able to get this grant. And I attend a conference in San Francisco, Wisdom 2.0, and I have my little booth, and one of my business partners finds that one of the heads up at this foundation is at this conference. And so he goes and tracks him down and brings him over to the booth at some point and introduces him to me. And I'm really excited, right? I get some FaceTime with this guy at the foundation who could maybe put in a good word about this grant for us, which again, if we won, it would be take such pressure off of me as one of the leaders of the organization for payroll and all of the just crippling fear that I have around making enough money to be able to sustain operations. And so this guy comes up, I meet him, It's like very nice, try to do the old razzle dazzle and make him remember me. I don't know, impress him in some way. And I'm handing him the magazine and telling him all about what we do. And he's like, okay, I've got this other meeting I got to go to. Da, 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 da. Maybe I'll see you at the end of the conference. And I'm like, okay. And so later that day, we're wrapping up. The conference has ended and I'm cleaning up my booth. And this guy comes over to the booth and he's like, can I help you clean up? And I'm like, wow, like, this guy that's very kind of him. And I said, like, hey, I'm going to go meet my business partner around the corner at this bar if you want to come grab drinks with us. And he's like, oh, yeah, that'd be great. And I like, okay, this is going very well. I'm very happy about this situation. Like, yay for Meghan. I'm doing a fantastic job as business development. And he helps me clean up my stuff. And I'm like, okay, so here's the name of the bar. Grab a lift. I've got to take this stuff over to my friend's apartment and drop off all these magazines and stuff. And I'll meet you over there. And he's like, no, I'll just hop in with you. Right there. I have this little, like, warning. My body's speaking to me. An inner wisdom, little red flag goes up. Just like, that's okay. I'm uncomfortable, but right, I push through that because this is a huge opportunity. I'm not going to just like base some random feeling I have and say, no, you can't come with me and worry about pissing this guy off and potentially losing this grant, right? So I'm like, okay, yeah, hop in the car. He helps me pack it all up. We're in this little Subaru and he's like, hey, we're driving out of the parking lot and I'm like, hey, could you navigate us to the place? I don't know where we're going. And he's like, I have a better idea. There's a place that I want to show you. Okay. Like intuition's just like warning, something, this is not feeling particularly right. And he's like, all right, so go out here and you're going to take a left onto this exit. And I get on. And if you're familiar with the San Francisco area at all, when you come out of the Presidio and you get on the like major highway there, once you get on, there's no more exits until you get to the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge. And so I'm in the car, we're driving, all of a sudden we're on the Golden Gate Bridge and we're like heading out of the city. I'm starting to get a little like panicky. And so I start like, talking to him about my husband and how much I love my husband and how very, very married I am. We get across the bridge. And at some point he's like, let's take this exit. We're like a no man's land. And I have this feeling that like, is he about to harm me? And I am quite literally at the point where I'm thinking about pulling the emergency brake and slamming the car and park and jumping out of the car. I'm freaking out. I'm like, something is very wrong here. And so I don't do my like tuck and roll out of a moving car. I go around and we come down and we end up going down into Sausalito. And he's like, we're going to go to this bar at Cavallo Point. It's got a gorgeous view of the city. And that's what I wanted to show you. And I'm like, okay, like maybe I'm overreacting here. And so I'm like, hey, like I told my business partner we were going to be at this bar. Can we can like see the view and then I need to head back. Cause like I had told other people we were going to be meeting them. And he's like, no, I really want to get a drink and just like, enjoy this. And I'm like, oh my God. And I'm at this point, if you identify as a woman, you have probably experienced this as well, where all of a sudden my comfort or my discomfort, I began to start telling myself that I'm overreacting, right? I'm making a big deal out of nothing. This guy's just being nice. And I start gaslighting myself internally and convincing myself that I have, in fact, misread this entire situation, that this, guy's maybe just a little socially awkward or whatnot, and that I need to continue to be kind and not make him uncomfortable, because if I make him uncomfortable in this particular situation, not only am I risking his discomfort, which, oh my God, that's not something that we do, but it also might jeopardize this huge deal that I'm hoping to get as a result of like whining and dining the guy. I'm like, okay, we got to get back across the bridge to my people. And I reluctantly like pull him out of the bar, get him back in my car. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to drop you off at the bar and I am going to go to my hotel and drop off my stuff. as my way of like getting a little bit of space from him. And he's like, no, I don't want you to be unsafe walking around by yourself and coming back to the bar. I'm just going to come to your hotel with you. At this point, we are in the middle of the Golden Gate Bridge, and I can't do my action hero tuck and roll off of the Golden Gate Bridge and plummet into the ocean. So, drive to my little hotel. I pull into the front. He gets out of the car, and I'm like, all right, like, I'm here. I'm fine. Can you just go sit over there on that bench? I'm going to take this stuff up, all the things. And he walks over to me and pulls my glasses off of my face and tells me, I think I would like to kiss you. And I'm like, nope. Like, here we're done. Hard line. Like, it took that all the way to this point of me feeling discomfort, knowing something is wrong. I just knew. I knew that this man was going to do something like this. For me to finally, he actually had to physically do something and say this thing to me for me to be like, no, just absolutely not. I am not interested. You're making me incredibly uncomfortable. Can you please leave? Thank God I at least said that. So he leaves, and lo and behold, we don't get the grant. So this would be one of many examples I have of when I ignored my intuition, especially in a professional context, especially when there were power dynamics at play. And that is the basis of what we're going to be talking about today, is why listening to your intuition is important and how to tap into it and how to use it in a leadership capacity. So intuition itself, again, when I mentioned it at the top, I was like, some people find it a little bit woo-woo, but there's a lot of research around how important your intuition is. Your intuition isn't based on logic. It uses unconscious signals from your brain and from your body. Author Malcolm Gladwell describes it as rapid cognition. And author Gavin de Becker, who's a world-renowned expert on predicting danger, explains that, this is his quote, "What you want to dismiss as coincidence or a gut feeling is in fact a cognitive process, faster than we recognize and far different from the familiar step-by-step thinking we rely on so willingly." So those gut feelings, the ones that are either trying to warn you and protect you or potentially guide you toward better decision-making or find inspiration as you're paying attention to things and you're noticing things coming up, it's a cognitive process that we need to start paying attention to instead of just dismissing outright as something that it's not logical, so it has no basis and doesn't belong in the business world. That is in fact not true. Yet, many women that I know ignore their intuition, especially when it comes to making someone else uncomfortable. And a lot of us have been trained and conditioned since we were young girls to be nice, right? To not make other people uncomfortable, to prioritize others' feelings over our own, to not rock the boat, to not speak up, to not talk back. We're supposed to be seen and not heard and be gentle and quiet and submissive. And so we grow up to be adults and we fear this place of when something inside of us is screaming that something is wrong or telling us that we need to make a different decision. But if it goes against what other people are doing or might make someone else uncomfortable, especially if it's a person in a position of power or a man, it all of a sudden becomes something that we don't need to pay attention to and we actively ignore. And it's really, really hard when we're in a professional context, especially beyond power dynamics when there are things like revenue, sales, financial opportunities that are involved in some of the dynamics in which our intuition is telling us that something is off, but we don't want to blow a sale for our team or make it so our career isn't going to progress or we're not going to get the promotion because we had like a bad feeling and we just dismiss it outright as something that we don't need to pay attention to. And it's not as valuable as the other feelings that we have. I mean, has this happened in your life? Having some sort of inner knowing about something that you ignored, and then later on, something bad happens. And what happens? You beat yourself up later. You're frustrated with yourself. Why didn't I listen? Why didn't I pay attention? I knew I shouldn't do that. I knew he was going to do that. I knew it was the wrong thing. And you ignore it and you let it go. And then you completely fall apart on the other side and blame yourself. We don't need to do that. For a lot of us, our intuition is speaking up, like mine was doing with this guy from the foundation, to protect us. It's warning us. And it is our work to try and attempt day after day to divorce ourselves from these ideas that our comfort isn't worth as much as someone else's. That has been the work I have been doing for so long, is just speaking up and telling other people that they are impacting me in a negative way has been so hard. And it is so rewarding. It has made my life so much better the more I pay attention and listen and speak up and use my voice and just value my comfort as much as other human beings. That is the work that we are here to do, is to unlearn these patterns of behavior that continue to harm us and put us in bad positions, and simply value and honor our own wisdom as much as we value others. So when we talk about intuition, one of the things in terms of a leadership capacity, beyond protecting you from potentially harmful situations, it is a proven way to make better decisions. Research has shown that intuition has proven to benefit complex decision making. It helps people perceive deception more accurately, and author De Becker highlighted that it enables us to make quicker and often more accurate decisions. It is that rapid cognitive process that helps us with decision making. And like I said, many leaders that I know that lean on intuition to help them make business decisions, and not minor ones, major ones. This is how Stephanie Nadi Olson, founder of We Are Rosie, talked about her journey with intuition.
I think once I kind of ripped the Band-Aid off and said, I'm going to do this really like batshit crazy thing nobody's going to expect from me. I'm going to build this business. I'm going to figure it out one step by one step. A couple things happened. Like, people really rallied around me, and I was able to attract people that also like believed in the vision and kind of validated what I was thinking and feeling. And then I decided like I was just going to keep those people close, and I didn't need much of them. And I was just going to keep my head down and do the next thing that felt really good. What is the next step for this business that gets me excited? And I've explained that to people as like, when you have to make a hard decision, think about the decisions that are in front of you and what's the one that gives you the most relief. Like, what's the one that makes you feel the best after you make that decision? Oh, if I do this, I will feel relief. If I do this, I'm going to feel anxious. If I do this. And I just kept choosing ease and relief and the things that felt really natural to me. And I would choose kind of this frictionless path of like, what feels like the next best thing for me in the business. And the road kept unfolding in front of me. I mean, it was surreal. I've never experienced anything like that in my life. I think nobody knows what you're capable of better than you. And if our goal is to change systems to make them more equitable or to make our personal dreams come true, like, you've got to follow your own intuition on that. And there were times, and even with We Are Rosie, where I would default to somebody else's opinion and say like, well, they know better than me. So if they feel really strongly about this, and then I would start to do that, whatever it was that they said I should do. And it would feel icky. It would feel wrong. And I would say, I had to find my own voice and get used to maybe being willing to disappoint other people, be willing to defend something that seemed strange or unusual that you were doing to build your business that other people wouldn't understand.
As Stephanie talked about, feeling that sense of relief, looking for what felt right and what felt easy. I was at a women's leadership retreat a while back, and Susie Baptiste, she's the founder of Poopery, the like poop spray. She was talking about how she calls this process the process of resonance and dissonance. And if you're familiar with what resonance means with sound waves, when you're resonant, the waves are actually coming and they're coming together to like make this resonant, gorgeous wave. When things are dissonant, the waves are actually in contrast to each other. So she pays attention to decisions that feel resonant, as Steph described, things that brought a sense of relief, what felt right, what felt good. Her entire team, they talk about things. Does this feel resonant? Does this feel good? Does this feel easeful? Does this feel like everything is in sync? And if it doesn't, if it feels dissonant, if it feels like it's hard and crunchy and they're forcing it, they pull back on whatever it is that they're doing. They use resonance, dissonance. Is it easy to make entire team-wide decisions for a multi-million dollar organization? And this is something that you can bring into your work as well. That sense of, does this feel right? Does it feel easeful? Does this feel resonant? And when you really feel like you're forcing things, can you step back and at least get a different perspective on it to try to understand why it feels so hard and ask yourself, is there a different approach that you should be taking? What would feel easeful? What would feel right? This is how Vicki Saunders talks about when things feel crunchy for her.
I just have a lot of experience with things happening with ease, enough to know that if things are hard, it's just not the right timing. Like that's the story that I've created from my experiences. And so during COVID, we had the most number of applications ever and like a ton of really, really good applications in Canada. And at that moment, government had been doing all these like 0% interest loans out to businesses to keep them alive because they wanted them to, it happened in lots of governments around the world. And so I thought, I wonder if the bank would match the $1 million we're going to put into ventures in Canada this year, because they're doing 0% interest loans right now. Maybe this would be the moment to ask. And so I just went to them and said, look, we could fund 24 ventures instead of 12. Do you want to just like run that up the flagpole? And the person's like, we don't do 0% interest loans. I'm like, you just did like thousands of them with the government backing. And they're like, oh yeah, well, let me ask. And literally like the next day I get a phone call back. And in 3 weeks, a bank matched our 0% interest loans, the head of business banking, and they were psyched about it. And it happened with ease, right through, like impossible. They would never do it again now. We could never get it going right now. But there was a moment in time where I just tested that out and it worked. And so I've had enough of those kinds of experiences over the years that I know that when someone's like, well, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks, like just forget it. When it's right, it just flows and it's gorgeous. And having said that, of course, there are times where you have to go back at things multiple times because you got to find the right entry point or the right person, or, maybe that's just not the way, and you use your water strategy to get yourself in there. But like in general, yeah, I walk away from a closed door. I just don't try and convince anyone of anything anymore.
Intuition is not only protecting us from potential harm or making bad decisions, it helps guide us and make the best decision possible. And the way to tap into it is to pay attention and to value your intuitive wisdom. So some of the key ways to pay attention and really bring more intuition into your life, one is just building in some quiet time in your day. Going for a walk, even if it's 10 minutes, meditating, any time that you have to not have inputs going into your brain, to quiet your brain and just pay attention and listen for what is coming up, what feelings, what ideas, what thoughts. Just finding quiet space is one of the best ways to actually begin noticing your intuition a little bit more. Second, pay attention to how your body feels. Your body and your brain, it is all connected. And especially if your body is sensing something or feels a certain way, that is often your intuitive wisdom speaking up. Diana Propper de Callejon, this was how she spoke about listening to her body earlier in her career.
I didn't actually get into Yale School of Management. I got into HBS. I had a job with McKinsey between my first and second year. I had gone to business school with the explicit intent to learn about business and the environment. I started focusing on market-based solutions to environmental problems. And I got a Echoing Green Fellowship to go and work in the Amazon. And I took a sabbatical from my full-time job offer at McKinsey to do my Echoing Green Fellowship in the Amazon, basically setting up supply chains for Ben & Jerry's and Body Shop and Knudsen Soda of non-timber forest products coming from the Amazons, and essentially providing loans to co-ops and small businesses to harvest, process, and ship down the Amazon and its tributaries. And the idea was create an economic base in the Amazon that came from the standing trees and the forest and plants rather than cutting it down for cattle and soybean. And, it was relatively small projects in the midst of a lot of destruction, but it got me hooked on this whole thing in the early 90s on using, the power of the private sector to move money and resources into solving environmental and social problems, and that there really was a burgeoning interface between those things. And so I came back and I tried to convince McKinsey to take their compliance-oriented environmental practice and turn it into helping companies figure out how to make money by developing products and services that solved environmental problems. And at the time, they were like, I don't really think so. If you want to come here and, do what we do, then great. And so I decided to not sign that six-figure, starting salary and five-figure bonus at the time. And it was a hard decision. Now, I suffer from migraine headaches, and one thing, if you're really in tune with yourself with migraine headaches, you can tell very quickly like what's going to agree with you and what's not. Like you could look at a glass of wine and go, no, don't do that. Or it's not the right time to eat cheese. It's going to make you sick. Or I knew that if I was sitting in a McKinsey office and doing the work I was going to have to do, that I would become very ill. And so on some level, it really wasn't a choice. I wasn't willing to, and I know that the illness factor had to do with values. It had to do with what, wanting to work on the cutting edge, wanting to be, entrepreneurial, right? But ultimately for me, I don't think it was possible. Physically, mentally, values wise, I would have felt like a, wild animal pacing up and down like in a cage, like a zoo animal. And I basically started with zero, and started a consulting firm with some colleagues that I found through the HBS network. And we set up for the next 10 years a strategy consulting and private equity advisory firm.
One of the best practices that I've ever come across is just the 5 senses. As sitting down and getting quiet, you can even do this in 5 minutes. When thinking about paying attention to your senses. What do I hear? What do I smell? What do I see around me? What can I feel physically? What can I taste? Just asking yourself these questions and paying attention to your senses can help you get quiet and listen to that, and also pay attention to how your body is feeling. Your body is sending you intuitive messages all the time that it wants you to listen to. So that's one of the better ways to be able to actually tap into it a little bit more. And the third way is reflection. This could be a daily practice, a weekly practice, whatever yours might be. There's, of course, gratitude. Journaling is one of the better ways to tap into compassion and joy and gratitude. And there's almost an intuitive journaling practice of just paying attention. What came up this week? What did you notice? Who comes to mind? What experiences came up for you? What ideas? This is one of those things where it not only helps you just center into paying attention and reflecting on your day or your week, but for me, it's almost a practice of following the breadcrumbs. And it's not necessarily about making a decision or keeping me from harm. It's about finding inspiration. If someone's name or someone's work comes up 2 or 3 times in a matter of a week or two, I pay attention. That means that I'm supposed to look that person up, reach out to them, try to connect with them. Those are little like sparks of intuitive hits that I get, that I pay attention to those. If I'm on a morning walk, and someone in my life comes to my mind, I text them right away, even just a little message, just, hey, how are you? I'm thinking about you. What's going on? It helps me stay in better social connection with people. It helps inspire me to just remind myself this gigantic, beautiful, interconnected web I'm a part of. So looking for inspiration, looking for these intuitive hits, paying attention, writing down who's coming up, what ideas, or if you're finding a particular interest area that feels new, all of a sudden you're learning about emotional intelligence or something. You read about it here, and then you read about an article there, and then you found this other person who has a podcast about it. Just continuing to follow the breadcrumbs of your intuitive interests that are coming up for you will inevitably lead to some of the coolest things. One of the most incredible intuitive hits and downloads that I ever had was I had been paying attention, like I said, to kind of who's coming up, women, ideas, all the things. And I guess this would have been in 2017. I'm sitting on the floor of our condo and I'm petting our dog and I'm like thinking about, I just like really what's coming up for me right now is that I just wish that I felt a deeper sense of connection with some of the women entrepreneurs that I know as a young female founder. And I had this intuitive download from the universe or powers that be, just like plunked into my brain the entire blueprint for this conference. Like, here's the name. We're going to call it the World Changing Women Summit. Here's the speakers. Here's exactly what we're going to do. Here's what it's going to look like. Just handed it to me. It was such a powerful idea that was downloaded to me. And I felt it so intuitively in my body that I got up in the middle of a conversation I had been having with my husband while petting my dog, ran to the guest room, ripped out a piece of paper, and like sketched it all down. And I've talked to other people who say that these downloads or these lightning strikes are extraordinary things that happen the more that they pay attention to what is going on around them. This conference ended up, we brought it to light the next year in 2018. We did our first World Changing Women Summit. And for 3 years running, we brought hundreds of women together for these extraordinarily powerful conferences that to this day, I still meet people who say, I was at World Changing Women 2019 or 2020, and I made this connection, or I met my business partner, or I had this crazy insight that led to this. Hugely powerful ripple effects that went out, all because I was in a place where I had been quiet and paying attention and listening. And I didn't immediately ignore that intuitive download as like that. Whew, I don't even know what that was. That's not realistic, or that couldn't happen for all of these reasons. No, I held it and I received it with the value and the care that it deserved. Has this ever happened to you? Where you get like a fantastic idea for something and it just is handed to you, or you get this huge download of inspiration about something, and then all of a sudden you convince yourself that it's not possible for some reason. You let your rational brain tell you that that intuitive wisdom isn't possible, and you decide that the analytical, rational, that side of your brain is worth so much more. That's the one you need to pay attention to, because that's what we're conditioned that is valued in business. And that as women, these intuitive feelings we have don't matter, are ones that we should be ignored. Quick recap. So we looked at the importance of intuition, how it helps us make better decisions, listening to what feels right, what feels good, what feels easeful, what feels resonant, what feels like relief in your decision making and as you're building things. We looked at how it can protect us from specific situations where it knows that something is wrong, and what it looks like to value your own comfort just as much as other people and speak up when in fact your intuition is protecting you from something that you should not be leaning into. We looked at how to actually tap more fully into your intuition, getting quiet, paying attention, listening to your body's wisdom, reflecting, looking for sparks of intuitive hits or little breadcrumbs that you can follow. All these ways of just bringing intuition into your life and leaning on it to help you with your own leadership, but it also just makes you feel more aligned with who you are and what your body and your brain and all this wisdom that you have inside of yourself is telling you. When you actively ignore it, you feel this sense of dissonance within yourself, right? Something feels wrong. It feels yucky or wrong, and you don't quite know what it is. But when you pay attention and you're aligned with what your intuition is telling you, you feel like you're in this sense of flow. It's much more comfortable. You're honoring yourself and all of the wisdom that you have learned throughout your life. So hopefully with these stories, intuition can become something that you pay a little bit more attention to and bring into your professional life and your personal life, and find it to be as valuable of a skill as all of these other leadership skills that we have put on a pedestal for so long while we've ignored so many of these other ones, many of which we'll talk about in forthcoming episodes. For today, that's all we've got. See you next time. Thanks again for listening to Better Than This. As a reminder, you can always find show notes and any corresponding resources for the show on the show's website at meganfrenchdunbar.com/betterthanthis. And if today's episode resonated with you, I would be very grateful if you could leave a review or a rating on whichever podcast platform you're listening to the show on, or share the episode with a friend who you think would appreciate it. You can also subscribe to my Stack for weekly insights and tools to support your growth along the way. Until next time, keep challenging the status quo so we can, wait for it, build something better than this. Take care.